I'd like to introduce you to today's presenter, Sherry Weppel. Sherry is the Director of Training and E-Learning Development at GP Strategies. She has over 15 years experience designing, developing, and delivering interactive, computer-based, and web-based learning modules. Her role is to drive innovative ISD techniques into the processes and provide valuable input on the state of learning and best-in-class practices. Sherry recently completed her MS in Learning Sciences and Technology with a focus in gaming for instruction at Lehigh University. She also has earned an MS in Instructional Design and Development from Lehigh University and a BS in Art Education from Kutztown University. With that, Sherry, I'd like to turn the session over to you.
Thanks so much. So what my bio didn't actually mention was the fact that I'm also a recovering art major, and that's really why this is a critical, exciting module to be giving you today. Art has been my true love. It's been my background. It's been with me since I had the 64 box of crayons. And when we focus on training solutions, the creative aspect or the visual aspect is really where I love to focus. We've actually added an individual to our team and a role to our team, which is called the Digital Creative Lead. And that individual is charged with driving the innovative solutions, charged with driving the visual aspect of things. So he is the mastermind behind a lot of these ideas, and that's part of what we're going to discuss today. So before we get started, we're going to take a little poll. We're going to think about how do you learn best. So when we think about how do you learn best, we want to think about, are you a visual learner? So when you learn things, do you learn best by seeing something? Or are you an auditory learner and you learn best by hearing something? So you don't necessarily need to see things in print, but maybe from an audiobook perspective, an audio recording perspective, that's how you learn best. Or are you a kinesthetic learner? Are you somebody who needs to learn by doing? Or are you a combination of all three? Today we're going to focus on our visual learners as we talk about visual learning, but we don't want to forget that we do have those auditory and kinesthetic learners as well. So you'll see that the solutions that we're presenting are rarely just visual images, but that we're actually presenting options and solutions that represent all the different learning styles out there to make sure that we're addressing that within your organization. So the poll that we're doing today is just something really nice for me to see, and I can see from the results that it looks like a lot of you are auditory learners or visual learners, and a lot of you are mixed learners. So it looks like we definitely have the right people in-house. It's a test that I would actually encourage you to do within your organization as you start to develop training solutions, is to start to poll your audience and see what types of training solutions are going to work best based on people's learning styles. It is always the best solution to try and create something that is both auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. But knowing where your audience fits within your team is always something that's nice to know in the background as you're developing training solutions. Before we really get started, we're going to start to talk about what the visual design definition is. So this is one of my favorite things that I found on the internet, and it's the infographic of Infographics. The purpose of this is really to show you what visual design is all about. So when we think about visual design is, if you look in the upper left-hand corner, we look at charts. So charts could be bar graphs, they could be pie charts, but look at the second one in, they could also be images of people. So it's a way of using graphics and color to represent things. So instead of having the number 2.29, we're actually showing 2.29 books, talking about how many credited sources are usually used. If we look in the lower left-hand corner, we're talking about key info. Well, we could type out that list in a bulleted list, but actually what we decided to use was to use a key icon instead to start to represent some of that content in a visual way to help the learner draw the connection. If we think about visual design in real life, it's something that we see every day. If you think about when you're driving in your car, you very rarely actually stop to read the signs and comprehend what they mean. What you actually do is you see the signs and you readily recognize this is an interstate sign, it's telling me where I'm going. This is an orange sign, there must be some sort of a detour or construction. This is a yellow sign, I need to have caution. This is a red sign, I need to stop. This is a white and black sign, that's the one-way sign. So you don't need to read these signs anymore because the visual cues are telling you the information that you need. So part of visual learning is helping the learner draw those connections through the use of imagery. But let's jump right into our visual design application. As we jump into types of visual design, there are 6 types of visual design that we're going to cover today. Those would be an infomercial, a quick reference card, a video, 3D animation, an audio cast, and of course the infographic. Now audio cast might strike you as something odd to be covering in a visual design session, but we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. So the flow of the rest of this session is going to be, we're going to talk about each of these different solutions. I'm going to show you a brief example, during which I'm going to pause, I'm not going to speak, and then I'm going to give you some color commentary basically on what that solution would be and where its application might be. After which we'll have a Q&A session, and so if you want to type questions in the Q&A module, you can feel free to do so at any point in time. The first thing that we're going to be talking about is an infomercial. So if you think about an infomercial is really a moving infographic. So use cases for an infomercial might be a change management communication. So where you think in the past you may send out this big lengthy email, maybe you have a town hall. That's a lot of time spent pulling your individuals together. It might be a lot of time from a travel perspective. If you're using an email, it might not be an effective means of communication. So this is a different approach to take from change management. You might be introducing what the training solution is. You might be using it for remediation, other important information that you need to convey, or yearly information. So if you think about the yearly training that everyone needs to take, maybe instead of making that just this click-through module that everybody has to take, maybe you convert it into something that's a little bit more engaging, a little more interesting, to make sure that your learners are not just putting the check in the checkbox, but that they're really getting the content and the information that you need them to have. On the right-hand side of the screen, you're going to see a lot of different icons, and these are going to tell you as we go through the different solutions what the different options include. So the duration is the length of time in which somebody would have to, it would take them to view it. It might also be the length of time in which somebody would spend with that content. So in this case, an infomercial is typically at most 4 minutes. The sweet spot is really somewhere around 30 seconds to a minute. The components would be images, music, narration, incorporated video, screen text. Really it runs the whole gamut of things that we can include within an infomercial. Your output, your file type is going to be a movie file, which is typically mobile accessible, which is fantastic that you can use it on your desktop and your mobile device. And from a complexity perspective, this is one of the more complicated solutions just from what it takes to be able to produce it. So let me jump to an infomercial. And again, I'm going to play the infomercial for a little bit so that you can see an example. This example is actually a infomercial for a product that we offer at GP Strategies. It's the planning and scheduling game. So if the infomercial intrigues you, we're holding a gamification lecture next week on Thursday. So you can also attend that as well or view the recorded webinar after the fact. So in this example where I have paused the frame, what we're looking at is an example of a moving infographic. So instead of having text on the screen that says, by having proper planning and scheduling, you can get the same effort that you would, you can have 30 technicians doing the work of 47 technicians. We're actually showing the little game pieces that are a part of the game. We're showing the 30 of them on the one side and the 47 on the other. So again, this is an example of an infomercial. It's typically animated, typically includes audio, music, imagery, videos. This one actually, if I allow it to continue, will also show some live action video of the game as well. As you can see, we can incorporate a lot of different types of media inside an infomercial. And it's a really effective way of communicating something. We've used them for really commercials or to give people a snapshot of what a solution might look like. Again, you can use them for change management, communication, really any kind of small tidbit of content that you need to get to somebody in a relatively quick and dynamic fashion. So we're we're going to jump back to our presentation, and next we're going to talk about video. So when it comes to video I think we're all pretty familiar with. You can use video for senior leadership messages, messages from the field. Typically this might be that talking head where you videotape a leader with some sort of likely beige background or they're in their office. You can also use it for demonstrations and role-play scenarios. Durations are typically the same as infomercials. Again, you could do maximum of 4 minutes. What we really try and aim to is 30 seconds to a minute. Components would be music, it would be narration, and of course it would be the video itself. The output of it is, again, going to be a video, but from a complexity perspective, it's a little bit easier. Now that being said, you don't have to have a talking head approach to the video. So in the example that I'm going to show you next, we've actually used a green screen to shoot the video. What you'll see as the effect is we have the ability to show the person who is being videotaped, but then behind him, we can have other images appear and text appear to support his message. So again, we're meeting the needs of those visual learners, we're meeting the needs of those auditory learners, and it really helps to bring the whole package together. So again, that's an example of we had some video in the beginning using a green screen. We used the Adobe suite to be able to take out the green and put in the background, and then we did transition into more of an infomercial style for the rest of the presentation. If we were to watch the entire video, it would wind up going back to the live action video at the end. Audiocast, again, as I had said earlier in the presentation, it might strike you as odd that audiocast would be included in a visual webinar. Really, when it comes down to it, yes, we want to, audiocasts are definitely going to meet the needs of our auditory learners, but again, we want to meet the needs of all of our learners whenever possible. A lot of the times where we're talking about keeping the duration very short is so that we can be supportive to our kinesthetic learners who have a very short attention span for not doing something. So that's where we like to keep that in that 30 seconds to a minute range. But from an audiocast perspective, we can add a lot of images to our audiocast, or sometimes called a podcast, to support our message. So for example, this can be used for a field worker message. It could be used as a change management communication. It can be used as an introduction to a particular topic. It's also a great thing from a mobile audience perspective. Durations should be relatively short, especially because there's not a whole lot dynamic going on the screen other than images. You're going to have images, music, and narration. Your file type is still going to be a video, but your complexity is going very down. So from a complexity perspective, this is the least complex solution. So let me jump over to the audiocast. And again, you're going to hear you're going to see the different images. You'll see how the images come onto the screen, so you can see that this is a lot more of a simple solution than most. So in this solution, we used a tool that actually does all of those transitions for you. So it's in the Apple suite. So you actually just drag and drop your images in there, and it does all the transitions in between. So again, this could have been just an audio file that somebody would listen to that gives them the explanation, but instead we incorporated some imagery and some animations to that to make it a little bit more of a dynamic presentation for our visual audiences. Next, we're going to talk about a quick reference card. So a quick reference card is something that we're all familiar with. Any kind of process or procedural. And the example that I'm going to show you is actually about a 15-page procedure. But using visual design, we're able to do that in a much quicker, shorter, and easier to use fashion. So it's great for quick reference, for navigation, for roles and responsibilities, for communicating information. It's not going to take somebody a long time to be able to read this and comprehend it. You're typically just dealing with images and text. Your file size is anything that's flat. So it's going to be an image file, a PDF, something like that. And from a complexity perspective, we're looking at something relatively simple. So if I jump out to this example, in this example, this was about a 15-page document. So it was letting people know that where you're at in each of the different processes, and this is what happens, and if something happens, you'll loop back to the previous phase. Well, instead of providing this bulleted list of steps 1 through 16, we're able to put that all together into an image. So much like if you were in an amusement park and you get to the What Is You Are Here map, this is allowing the learner to figure out where they're at and figure out where they need to go next or what to do in case something else happens. So this is an example of taking that infographic concept and the visual design concept of using images to convey information and taking something that was a very complicated procedural task and making it something that's very easy to use. We also have 3D animation. So from a 3D animation perspective, this is great for safety information, medical processes, difficult to describe concepts, mechanisms, and equipment. So this is any time where you're trying to communicate information of something where maybe you can't have them travel to that location. So if there's a piece of equipment and you can't get that equipment to the learners, 3D animation is a great solution for that. If maybe there's only one piece of equipment and you have a broad audience base to train, this is also a way to communicate a large piece of information to a large audience. It doesn't replace hands-on, and so we definitely need to remember our kinesthetic learners and include some hands-on training as well. We want to keep these durations very short. We're going to have some photographs, some text, some music, some animation, some narration. The video, it's still going to be a video file type, and then from a complexity perspective, we're looking at pretty complex in this situation. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you two different 3D components, and the real benefit to 3D is that we can show multiple viewpoints. So in the first view, I'm going to show you what it would look like as a pedestrian or as a bystander to this fork truck who's going to come up and lift up a coil. And what we're talking about in this situation is the safety that you need to consider from an obstructed view when you have that coil lifted up on the forklift. So in that scenario, it's really hard being on the outside looking in to try and figure out what is the experience of that person who's driving the fork truck. Well, the benefit to 3D animation from a visual perspective is we don't have to leave that to the imagination. We can simply, in the 3D environment, move the camera somewhere else and be able to capture that experience for the learner. So now I'll play that same exact animation, but shot from a different angle. And the benefit is that you can actually show those two images side by side. So when we use these inside an e-learning module, you are actually able to see the pedestrian view and see the driver view at the same time to get that experience that you cannot get in real life. And finally, we have the infographic. So an infographic is great for statistics, information, charts, and data. I'd expand that to say an infographic is great for a lot of different things, and there's really no limits to what you can use an infographic for, because an infographic, what that truly is it's taking information that's in a text-based format and making it visually appealing so that it's easier for the learner to digest and understand. From a duration perspective, these are typically single images. The components would be photographs and text. The file type would be some sort of an image file type again, so it could be a PDF, it could be some sort of an image. And then from a complexity perspective, I do consider this to be medium. The reason why I consider it to be medium is that there is a lot of creativity that needs to go into place for this to be done correctly. So it really takes you taking a step back from the data, taking a step back from the information, and trying to find a way to make it make sense. So for example, what we would typically do in the past is we would have a module that would start, in this module you will learn, and then you're going to have bullets that are underneath that of what the different objectives are. Using the infographic approach, what you would actually do is come up with an icon or an image that represents what those different bullets are, so that you don't have so much text on the screen, and so that people have an icon that they can see and recognize and be able to identify when they get to that component of the training. So here at GP, we actually use an infographic for our annual report. Now, while there is still the big thick binder that everybody knows and loves from an annual report perspective, we're actually using graphics to be able to convey that information. I believe you can actually control the scroll bar to scroll this up and down. So you can see down at the bottom of the screen, we have the ability to create a chart showing our different market sectors. And then we use icons to be able to represent each of those different market sectors. Now, because we do have a wide audience, and maybe we have some learners out there who aren't visual learners who need to comprehend this information, we do also explain the key and use color coding and use all sorts of other methods to communicate our information as well. But this is just an example of how we're able to communicate complex information in a one-page document that allows us to really represent it in a visual manner. So what are our key takeaways from this session? If there were 3 things that you could take away from this session other than what the different solutions might be, it's really to keep things short. So whenever we're talking about a visual solution, we want to make sure that we're either doing something that's dynamic. So if we're creating an infographic, maybe making it an interactive infographic where they can click on the different components of the infographic to learn more. But we want to make sure that we're keeping in mind our kinesthetic learners as well. So we want to keep things short to keep in the attention span that most people have nowadays. We want to make sure that it's memorable as well. So we want to make sure that whatever we're doing, we're using images that are going to really stick with the learners. We want to create that solution that's sticky, something that's going to hang around, and something that's going to communicate a message in that very short time frame. And we want to make an impact. So whatever we're creating, we don't want to create training just for the sake of creating training. We want to make sure that we're thinking about what we're doing, that we have a goal or mission in mind, and that what we're creating is going to achieve that goal or mission. So whatever imagery we're using, whatever visual design we're using, whatever solution that we're using, we're mission-minded as we're doing that. At this point in time, we're going to have a short Q&A. All of the Q&A sessions are going to be out on the GP blog, so we'll be sending out a link to that as well. And because this is a recorded session, we're actually going to cut the Q&A so that you can read that on the blog instead. And what we're going to do right now is, in closing, if you have any questions or want additional information, please